Hi there, it's Christy with the Chirp YouTube channel. I'm excited to talk to you today, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. It is extremely hot here. I live in the Arizona desert in the Phoenix metro area, and yesterday it hit 118.3. Right now, let me look at my thermometer, it is 115. So not as hot as yesterday, which is a good thing. Although the day is not finished yet. We'll see how hot it gets. It's very exciting living through this heat wave, especially since I have been able to stay indoors most of the time. I would like to update the video I did a while back on echolalia. It turns out that that video was one of my most viewed of all time, and the one that I have probably gotten the most comments and questions on. So I thought I'd do kind of a little update addressing some of the issues that families have mentioned, or the questions that other professionals have mentioned on this topic. I am happy to have received an email just this morning from a mom who has a child who is extremely good at labeling, which is a very good skill to have. It's very common for children on the autism spectrum to have labeling as one of their strengths. It's very solid, it's very definite. If you hold up an apple, it's really easy to know every single time that that's an apple. It doesn't change very much, and there aren't very many gray areas. It's an apple. We can use this. This child is having a lot of difficulty with pronouns, with using pronouns in language and with knowing which pronoun is the appropriate one to use. Instead of saying, she's running, and pointing at his sister, he will use her name instead. Instead of saying, I need help, he will say, Mommy, get up. And then he will take her to whatever he wants. He's making do with the language abilities that he has very, very efficiently, which we like. But of course, we want him to move on and to be able to develop the next level of skills, which is using pronouns. Pronouns are usually a problem for kids with echolalia, which, by the way, is a child who repeats verbatim something that someone else has said that may or may not be appropriate to the situation at hand. So for example, a child who is echolalic might ask for something by saying, you want juice? When what he really should be saying is, I want juice, please. Instead, he is echoing what someone else said to him when he showed an interest in juice. So oftentimes a child, let's say this child is on the autism spectrum, the child walks over to the fridge and looks at it, and mom says, do you want juice? And the child gets juice. So the next time he comes back, he remembers that phrase and thinks, what I need to say to get juice is, do you want juice? And so that's what he says. We need to start prompting in a different way to make this child more successful with communicating. And the way we need to do that is using something called as-if speaking. As-if speaking is speaking as if you are the child. We are going to prompt exactly what we want the child to say. We walk over to the fridge. The child is walking alongside us. The child looks at us, expecting us to say, do you want juice? And the child maybe even says, do you want juice? Instead, I'm going to prompt, I want juice, please. I am saying, I want juice, please, because that is what the child's echolalic brain will latch onto. Therefore, that is what he will produce when he wants juice. And that's the appropriate thing that he should produce when he wants juice. It's a very, very, very effective strategy. And in fact, it's the only strategy that I've seen be effective with kids who do echolalia. This can be used in all sorts of different contexts. When we're playing a turn-taking game, instead of saying, my turn, your turn, I would pat the child on the chest like this, take his hand, my turn, when it's his turn. When it's my turn, I would help him point at me and say, your turn, Christy. You can see it can get a little bit confusing sometimes, but we're the adult in this situation. We are the more experienced communication partner, and therefore we are the ones that need to be doing the modeling and the appropriate prompting. The question that this mom had in her email was probably along the lines of, is this really going to work? And yes, it will. But also, how do we move past this? How do we, once we get him to do the right pronouns, how do we get him to learn all the other ones? And this is also a matter of modeling. For example, since most children with this issue are very, very good at labeling and are very interested in particular characters, particular books, we use those as our tools to help the child learn all the other pronouns that he needs to know. For example, if we are watching Goofy on TV and Goofy is doing a little dance, I might say, Goofy is dancing. He is dancing. He is dancing. If his sister zooms by, I might say, she is running. She is running. Also, speak from the perspective of some of your child's favorite characters or toys. If you have a Thomas the Tank Engine train, you might pretend to be that tank engine. Let's say you decide to be Thomas. The more funny voices you can do, the better. But they don't have to be good. I'm terrible at funny voices, but I can do a low voice, and I can do a high voice, and I can do a medium voice. And the medium voice is usually my own. The low one is usually a boy toy, and the high one is usually a female toy. And the medium one, of course, is me. So if I'm pretending to be Thomas, I would say, I am driving along my track. I am driving. And then maybe I crash, or maybe I fall off a cliff, and I might say, oh no, I fell over. I fell over the cliff. I fell. Keep repeating the pronouns that you want the child to use. Keep repeating the pronouns especially. Those are what we want the child to learn. And if the child is having a special difficulty with the I pronoun, which is the case in most of these situations, then we want the toys to be speaking in I statements. I feel angry. I am running. I fell down. I'm chugging along my track. Those kind of statements will train the I pronoun more strongly. It is kind of like a muscle. And if you think about it, in a child's world, let's say a child has a language delay. In a child's world, we don't often walk around saying, I'm going to get a drink. I am walking. We don't normally do that in our homes or in a school classroom. So the I pronoun is not one that actually gets used that much. It's more one that we think. It's more one that we use in certain circumstances, but not necessarily as we're going about our daily activities. And so children don't have as much of a chance to hear it being used properly. And we want to make sure that we give them lots of opportunities to hear it being used properly. And using it in play is one of the ways that we can do that. I also wanted to mention that when we're talking about whether a child will ever learn all the other pronouns, one of the issues with echolalia is that kids don't understand the back and forth nature of language, and they don't catch on to language happening in their environment. One of the problems with language delays, especially those connected to an overall developmental disorder, is that the child is not able to learn from his environment just naturally, like a typically developing child would. We have to purposefully, intentionally teach unique skills during the first part of life. And usually communication and the early stages of communication, like requesting and describing and labeling and those kind of things that I'm talking about today, usually those things are the ones that we have to teach very intentionally and very carefully and correctly. And once we get those working, once a child knows, I am dancing, he is running, she is sitting, we are having fun. Once a child can do these things, he can learn from his environment in a more efficient way and really pick up on all the cues that typically developing children pick up naturally from birth. There's something that gets missed early on, and the child is delayed because of that. Some of that can be a sensory need that isn't being met. Some of it can be a hearing disorder or a relational difficulty, internal medical things. There are all sorts of things that can cut a chunk out of a child's development and mean that he or she cannot learn from the environment the way a typically developing kid would. And we need to help the child pick up those missing things, and hopefully that will enable him to catch up to being able to pick up pronouns from the environment, pick up new words, learn how to use particular verbs with particular nouns and pronouns. Those are things that a typical kid should be able to get from the environment, but most of our kids with delays can't. And so what I'm saying from all of that is, once we get the pronouns figured out for this child, once we get I and you, then the rest of language isn't as confusing as that. Most of the rest of language doesn't change based on who's saying it. Just the pronouns and the verbs that go with the pronouns change based on who's saying the words. And those are the parts that are going to be the most difficult for children with developmental delays. Teaching and parenting is always about looking at the level your child or student currently is able to achieve and picking out missing skills that need to be taught right now. And we are never done with that. There's always something new that needs to be fixed. There's always something new behavior-wise that we need to work on. There's always a new skill that we need to teach. When a child is 18, it doesn't mean that our relationship with our daughter is finished. There are still things that she doesn't know that we do know. That's the case for every child. And so we have to fix whatever the biggest issue is right in this moment. If your child is exhibiting echolalia, he is not communicating effectively and not understanding language correctly either, because those pronouns are all mixed up. We need to fix that. And if that is the first thing on our list of things that is probably preventing our child from accessing language in the world around him, then that is what we need to work on. And we need to hit it hard, and we need to be persistent. And when our child starts using those pronouns correctly and independently, we can back off on the cueing. So we don't offer the prompt anymore, and we don't talk quite so much about what other characters are doing. We let our child kind of manage that himself because he's achieved that level of success with that skill. Then we look again, we assess, and we say, okay, what's the next skill we need to work on? And then we hit that one hard. Just one thing at a time, and the more we build on top of each other like that with the skills, the more our child is able to glean from the world around him, and the less purposeful teaching we have to do. Even though we still have to do that, it becomes less as the child can learn from what is around him. I hope this video gave you some encouragement. Stick with it. You are doing a great job supporting the kids in your life and doing the best you can to help them gain more efficient, more effective language and communication skills, and behavior skills too, I'm sure. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.